to the cloud here. And we're live, believe it or not. We're here on Zoom, and we'll be folk showing up there on Facebook as well. But this is Steve Taubman. I'm here with Ben Gay. I've been looking forward to meeting you, Ben, for a long time.
And vice versa.
Yeah, I think we've been kind of traveling in similar circles, and so we've been on each other's radar for a while. And Ben is a very well-known and well-respected, I would say, coach and thought leader in the area of sales and I suppose sort of network marketing as well. Or is that kind of a big part of your?
Well, that's where I got my start. And I coach a lot of those people and some of the owners of the companies. I'm not actively involved anymore, but multi-level marketing, direct sales is where I got my start back in Atlanta in a cosmetic company, which became the largest direct sales MLM company in the world for a while, bigger than Amway and Shackley combined.
Yeah.
And through a little luck and hard work at 25, I went from distributor at 23 to president of the company at 25.
Wow.
So, and if we had had the internet and all the things you and I take for granted today, back then, I would now be the benevolent dictator of the world.
Well, I'm not sure if I'm glad or not glad about
yeah,
that.
well, I could argue it either way.
I have a better idea.
Yeah. We were, inviting people to meetings, driving to their house to pick them up to make sure they actually came,
Right.
driving them downtown, giving a meeting in person, working till midnight, driving them home, some of them, not all of them, fortunately. And in spite of that, I made a good deal of money by today's standards, adjusted for inflation, a whole lot of money. And I look at people today, they can do with a click what it took me 10 days to do in person.
Isn't that amazing? I mean,
Yeah.
you're right. We take it for granted. I was in the car the other day, and I was talking to a friend, and I said, "Oh, Woody looks so cute right now." My dog Woody, and he says, "Take a picture." So I just went, and then I pushed a button, and she's looking at the same picture. And I thought, 10 years ago, it would have been a week before she had that picture. I'd have to
you go to Photomat. Yeah.
Different world. Wow.
We live in amazing times.
We do indeed. And so that kind of brings up an interesting question, which is, given the fact that we have the capacity to do so much with with such few resources, really, how are people succeeding during the pandemic? And how has this influenced or altered what you do? I mean, obviously you're not out driving people to meetings, but of course you don't have to anymore. So talk a little bit about this, business in the time of isolation.
Well, I do 24 seminars a year, down from 300. Gigi, when I married her 24 years ago, she knew both of my previous wives and why those marriages came apart. And she said, "I love you and I want to marry you, but we have to talk." 300 seminars got negotiated down to 24, no more than 3 in any one month. No local clients in Placerville, California. That wasn't a big sacrifice, but I acted like it was. So I could use it as a negotiating tool.
I was going to say, you're going to negotiate.
Yeah.
I think you got 24, not 19.
Yeah. Placerville Hardware, I didn't think was going to hire me anyway.
Not like that.
And no speeches within 50 miles of home. And I remember going, uh-oh. I said, "How far away is South Lake Tahoe?" And she said, 60. I said, "Deal." So that reduced me down to 24 a year, plus writing. I've written 26 books, and coaching and consulting and ghostwriting and so on. So when this hit, I had to take a look at, all the live seminars disappeared. Yeah. First of all, for the next 2 weeks, and then next month, and now people do not see you next year.
Yeah.
So that went away. But interestingly enough, book sales went up. Of the Closers series, the one I'm sort of famous for, and they ticked up, and they've been steady for many, many years. So that was good. Coaching and consulting went up because people panicked, and people who were thinking about it suddenly wanted in. I now have a waiting list. Ghostwriting went up because all those people who've always had a book inside of them but didn't have the discipline to write it, they've still got the book inside of them. They got time to think about it now. So ghostwriting went up. So net, I'm probably just about even, and I don't have to travel. it's not all bad news, because I was fearing growing old on airplanes. Uh,
Yeah, yeah.
I really don't miss that at all. And I've even done a few seminars now. Uh, as it started, they still gathered, but they brought me in via camera. Now everybody's on camera, and I'm
Right.
still doing them. But I really don't like that, because you don't have, as you know, stand in front of a crowd and getting an immediate response and looking at the 4 or 5 special people you've picked out in the audience,
Yeah,
that seem to
sooner
like
or
you.
later it's going to get pretty old not to have that experience, because you and I both, like, we get off on that kind of interaction. And
Absolutely.
so we like
I,
the,
I would give a seminar a day, Steve, if I could magic wand myself into Detroit and magic wand myself back home. What I don't like is the way travel has become. In the old days, I had a Learjet. So it was a company plane, but I was president of the company. Learjet makes life a whole lot easier for those of us who are buzzing around. But
yeah,
commercial nowadays, it's a nightmare.
yeah, yeah, I hear you. Yeah, I was for a long time. I was flying a private. I had a Mooney. It was a
Oh,
single
yeah,
engine plane, and it wasn't a Learjet by any means. But as as a performer and a speaker, I'd often use the plane to get where I needed to go,
sure.
and it was because it made it fun. It was certainly a lot easier. There were times when I was meant to go commercially, and then something happened with the flight, and I said, "Okay, I'll hop into my plane. I'm going," and I would do that.
Absolutely. The first tour that I ever did, I went with William Penn Patrick, who owned the company, and
Okay.
semi-famous guy, ran for governor of California against Reagan, et cetera. Uh, when I went on a tour with him, turned out he was checking me out. Uh, he'd heard good things, but he was checking me out. We did 25 cities in 25 days in a Cessna 310. And it wouldn't have been possible any other way than a private plane. But
Yeah,
as you know, the glory of, people would come out to the airport to watch the Learjet land, because
yeah,
it looked so glamorous from the outside.
yeah.
Inside, there's a cooler for a ham, not an electric cooler, a thermos container in the wall for a ham sandwich if you were smart enough to bring one, a
Right.
toilet with a curtain around it. So if you don't mind going to the bathroom in front of all your friends, you can do that. So I used to, back when commercial planes were fun, we had a rule: if 2 people were going anywhere, they went in the Learjet, because it became cost effective.
Mhm.
So I would send people out of town in the Learjet so I could fly American or whatever first class, like to New York.
Oh, that's
And people
funny.
say, why don't you bring the Learjet? Because it's uncomfortable. It only looks good from the outside.
Right, right, right. Well, I think you finally dissuaded some of the people who are listening to this from going out and buying a Learjet.
Don't.
Well, it's like with a boat, right? The best 2 days of your life are the day you buy it and the day you sell it.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Dr. Hill taught me when he was my mentor.
yeah,
I was talking about getting something. I think it was a Mercedes 600 or something. My ego was not in check, and lots of money was coming in.
right.
And he said, Ben, you don't want to own things. You want the use of things. And he got me into, we go up to Tahoe frequently and entertain people on a boat that I was going to buy. Now we lease it for the weekend 4 or 5 times a year. That's all I have time for.
That's
So I
actually that's a great little lesson for anybody, right? Because
sure
a
is.
lot of us, feel like we've got to, I need so much money in order to acquire these things. And so many of those things are available just for short term. And then you're not responsible for maintenance. You're not responsible for upkeep. And, God forbid something happened to it. It's just give it back.
Make it somebody else's problem. Somebody asked me the other day, how many cars do you have? We have one. So I don't know, why they asked me. I
Uh-huh.
guess they thought they were going to hear 12 or something. And I said 200. And they said, my God, where do you park them? I said, about 3 blocks from my house, there's Enterprise. And they maintain them for me. All they need is a few hours notice, and I can have virtually any car in the world there with a driver if I want. It's marvelous, and it costs about $100 a day at the worst.
Yeah, I love this philosophy. I think a lot of there's this sense that everything's got to be owned, the ownership mentality. And then It doesn't have to be that way.
No, I wouldn't own our house if it weren't just a sound investment, you know.
Right.
But as far as the desire to put it, we're about to put a $60,000 roof on the main house and a guest house. I would love that to be a landlord's problem, but
Right.
unfortunately, I
You
didn't
don't
think
have
it
it.
through when it came to houses.
Yeah. Well, I'm a condo owner, so although I do
Oh,
own it,
yeah.
it's the maintenance is pretty minimal. You know, somebody else is shoveling the snow and mowing the lawn, and in fact, they're doing some re-roofing right now.
Excellent.
Yeah,
And what do you pay, a monthly something?
pay a monthly fee. Yeah, and it's
Yeah.
a beautiful. I'm on Lake Champlain, right out the window over here. Is
Wow.
you know, I look out at the Adirondacks, and it's pretty spectacular.
I look out at the Sierra Mountains,
Oh, that's
so I
gorgeous.
can see the snow.
Hmm.
Even in the summer, there's usually still some. I can see the snow, but in Placerville, at 1,700 feet, we don't shovel it. We just look at it.
There you go. That's perfect. Let it
Yeah.
move. So you're doing a fair amount of virtual training right now, and what do you think about folks who are, you know, aspiring thought leaders or speakers or things? What would you recommend to people who are kind of in, you know, or even entrepreneurs to try to get themselves through this period of time?
Well, let me tell you the one I've been really hammering on with people,
Yeah,
because everybody, your question tends toward what do we do now with this problem.
yeah, yeah,
Uh, in addition to that, let me answer it more profoundly.
yeah.
Had you known this was going to happen 10 years ago, what would you have done differently? Well, they always say, well, I would have done this and this and this and so on. I said, great. It's going to happen again. I'm at
Mm,
the age where this is not my first rodeo.
mm,
We've been through 5 major wars,
mhm,
the Vietnam era protests, the civil rights movement. I watched Chicago and Detroit be burned to the ground after Martin Luther King Jr. was killed. I was doing seminars in both cities. It's the
mm,
reason I'm acutely aware of it. Is
yeah,
police escorts took us to the hotel and so on.
yeah.
Uh, so it's coming again.
Mhm,
A war, a tornado the size of the country,
mm,
another pandemic, whatever.
right.
So if you weren't ready for this one, at least use it as a lesson to get ready for the next one. Warren Buffett said something at a stockholders meeting one day that I never forgot. He said, when the tide goes out, as it will, it shows who's skinny dipping. I had friends and clients calling me because they had a cash problem
Yeah,
5 days after California and several other states shut down. So their false facade of doing fine had
right.
a 5 day timer on it. And I've heard for years, you know, most American families only $500 away from being, you know, one $500 emergency wipes them out,
Yeah.
or they're only one check away. Well, that was just sort of background noise to me because I thought that that can't be true. I've had ups and downs in my life, but I didn't skid along at that level for more than a month or so at
Yeah.
any given time. And it's true. Many businesses, people, I saw on one of the news shows the other day, one of the talking heads has a good friend who owned 2 very successful restaurants, who
Mhm.
turned in the keys to their landlords the other day and said, we won't be coming back.
Yeah, we've seen that
So
happen right here locally as well. It's frightening that a business that's established itself over time hasn't got the resources to ride that, you know, that wave, so to speak.
right, so they were, those 2 that turned in the keys were what, 40 days, 40 days ago they were looking good.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
now they're turning the keys and walking away from 30 years of effort and work and image building and so on.
Mm,
So learn from that forward. Now, I, as personally, most of my pain through this is listening to friends. I get up in the morning and I got a list of calls to make already, a return,
mm,
and on webinars and so on. So I'm experiencing the pain through them. So I know what they're doing and I know what I'm telling them to do.
yeah,
But the real message is, if you got caught this time, shame on you.
Yeah.
If you get caught, or shame on the virus.
Right,
If
right.
you get caught again, shame on you. If I ran a very successful restaurant in New York, a certain percentage of that would have gone into a never touch fund
Mm-hmm.
to get me through whatever hotel. If you're operating 40 days from the brink, then what if your people went out on strike and picketed your restaurant over something? 40 days of that, you'd be turning in the keys. So that's a real lesson for the other people. And I know this is trite, it must have been said 8 billion times in the last 2 months.
Mm-hmm.
This too shall pass.
Mm.
Just sit still. Every bad thing that happened to you in your life that was going to be the end of the world wasn't, and this won't be either. So be smart. I started telling somebody the other day who I know eats out daily, 2 and 3 times a day, at night with his wife and during the day. I said, cut back on your rests. And then I thought, well, he sort of has to cut back on his restaurant because except for the drive through at Taco Bell,
Yeah.
that's not one of his options anymore. But he told me, his wife said our personal checking account is going up. They figured they were saving $4,000 a month by not eating out. 4,000 a month.
I've rediscovered peanut butter and jelly also, I
Yeah,
have to say.
yeah. I had some top ramen crunched up on top of something the other day.
Yeah.
Old college trick I'd forgotten about. It makes a great topping. You don't cook it or anything; just bang up the bag and pour it on the salad. It was on a salad. So some of those things, but basically, it's just common sense. It will pass. It's already starting to pass. For some people, it's starting to pass too soon. Now, the administration is being criticized for that, and the poor Georgia governor, they were picketing to open things up. So he's
Mm-hmm.
going to open things up tomorrow, and now they're picketing because he's opening things up.
Yeah.
But it will pass, and when it does, you will have survived. You
Mm-hmm.
may be a little beaten up and dusty. That's fine. So are all your friends.
Yeah.
They're going to have gone through it. This time, you won't be the only person broke in the neighborhood.
That's really cool. And and economy rises and falls en masse anyway. So
Right.
you're still like kind of in the curve, so to speak, wherever that curve happens to have fallen.
Yeah, and use this time to retool. I've looked at a couple. For instance, I'm not sure I'm going back to even 24 seminars a year.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think it's necessary. I coach a lot of people in the car business, dealers and their salespeople,
Mm-hmm.
and they've been laughing at CarMax. We need a salesperson. Everybody likes to come into the dealership and mud wrestle. And I kept saying, no, you're not immune to what every other business has gone through. The internet will, in time, radically adjust your business. Oh no, never the car business. Well, guess what? It's adjusted the car business now. They're
Yeah.
selling cars online, no touch delivery. You don't have to come in. I'll video the walk around for you and so on. And CarMax, they sold 167,000 used cars last year, expects to more than double that this year. And once someone has gone through the pleasant, no hassle experience of clicking on a car, liking it, has a 7-day return policy, clicking on a car, it shows up in your driveway, and assuming you like it, there was nothing to it. They handled the financing, the pricing, everything over the internet. So if you're in some business where you believe you're not vulnerable to that, you're mistaken.
Or that you're above all that. That's the other. There's this sort of
Yeah.
cockiness associated with that. This is the way we do things, and not so much. This is
No.
the big world out there. Yeah, that's fascinating. I think that it's gonna change things for the long haul for that reason, because we're
Absolutely.
beginning to realize how pleasant it is. I mean, look what Amazon was able to do with buying everything. I mean, like there are all sorts of downsides to Amazon as a mega corporation, but the reality is they've created convenience beyond belief.
Yeah, and it hurts me when we have a friend here, family had a clothing store here for 133 years,
Yeah.
and it wasn't just Amazon, but the economy, and there's parking problems downtown, but Amazon was a factor.
Yeah.
They closed up shop, 133 years, closed up shop. But then people say, well, it's destroying businesses. Well, Amazon doesn't manufacture what they sell. They're still, withdraw to your home and sell your stuff to Amazon or through Amazon
Uh-huh.
and plunge on. Some of those starving little stores I see as I travel around, I'm always, I have a theory, everybody should pay me $500 before they go into business, and I'll tell them whether they should go in business or not.
That's the
They're
best $500 they'll ever spend, I'm sure.
absolutely that cute little hobby. Everybody says, "Oh, open a store and do that." You can just spot the losers as they pop up.
Yeah.
But if, in addition to staring at the front door waiting for somebody to come in, they'd get in the back room and learn how to use eBay and Amazon and the internet, then that would just be a front. We do more business from our little office and a shipping department than 99% of the stores, little stores across the country. And there's no sign we're doing it. It's all on the internet and referrals. I mean,
Yeah.
people, say, I don't know you. I was hard time finding you. Apparently, you don't know how to use a computer. I'm not hard to find, but we don't know you. But send us 500 books. Well, that's a referral business from many, many years ago. And so we feed off of that to a large degree. But we don't need a storefront, and we do more than those with storefronts. Adjust. Can you imagine being in the buggy whip business about 90 years ago and people saying, I think this is coming to an end? No, people will always need buggy whips. Well,
Yeah.
about 1/10 of 1% need a buggy whip once in their lifetime. They take care of it. They don't need another one. That's not a good business. And a lot of the business models today, sorry, it's over. Well, in 6 months, people will be shaking hands again, maybe a little less, but they'll be shaking hands again. Some of the lessons will shake off, but entire industries will change.
Mm-hmm. But the message of adjust is a powerful one, and it's kind of like a no nonsense message, right? It's like, you could coddle people and be like, "I'm so sorry that you're going
Yeah.
through. It's okay, it'll come back." It's like, dude, read the writing on the wall, right? And so there
What
are.
did this, the old saying, stress or crisis or something doesn't create character, it reveals what character there was or is.
Yeah.
This situation didn't tube anybody. It revealed to many people that they were already tubed. They just didn't know it.
Mm, yeah. Yeah, that's absolutely true. And so I think part of what we need, the psychological formula for being able to adapt to the situation, to adapt and adjust, is detachment. Like, you can't be too attached to your view of how things are supposed to be. Like, you've got to be willing to, like, say, I'll learn something new, and not having so much ego. A lot of the people who are kind of puffed up and this is the way it's always been done and it's always going to keep being done this way, they're going to go down hard. But it's like, if you're not, like, ego bound, I've been through ups and downs in my life, and I've lived an opulent, luxurious life, and I've lived in small 1-bedroom apartments, that weren't very nice. And, like, I'm still the same person, right? I feel like, regardless of what I'm encountering, I'm going to accept, I'm going to adapt, I'm going to figure out what's next.
Absolutely. And you got to be prepared to do that even in the good times, and this too shall pass is
Yeah.
true of the good times.
Yeah.
It
Yeah, that's
won't
right.
unless you inherited more money than you can possibly spend, uh, and probably have a trustee making sure you don't spend more than that. Somebody who left it to you was bright enough to protect you from you. It all ends. I drove into this town 40 years ago, roughly, uh, in a borrowed Mercury Bobcat. The car dealer I'd bought over 600 cars from to give away
Yeah.
lent me a Mercury Bobcat to get out of town. I went broke. The house was foreclosed on, one of the bigger houses in Marin County, California, on top of a hill overlooking San Francisco Bay. It was never going to end. And it
Yeah,
ended.
right. And it
I
ended.
made some stupid moves, and I drove into this town in a borrowed Mercury Bobcat, and he made it clear he wanted it back in 30 days with a nickel in my pocket. I left Marin County with 45 cents, but I didn't know about the Carquinez Bridge. I'd never driven up into this direction. We're up near Sacramento. The Carquinez Bridge, God knows what it is now, back then was a 40-cent toll. So they took 40 of my 45 cents.
They almost bankrupted you.
Yeah. Well, if I'd had enough money, I would have gone bankrupt. But it costs money to go bankrupt. The attorneys want upfront money. So because I was willing to adjust and all, I took that moment of calmness to invent the nationwide toll-free 800 call center business. And we, in this little town, starting with a nickel, opened the first, therefore the largest, but it was also the largest after we had competition, largest toll-free call center in the world, starting with a nickel. Horrible situation. Bill chasers, phoning as soon as they find. It's amazing how fast they can find your phone number. Phoning the new phone number, etc. But we picked ourselves up, dusted ourselves off, and marched on. And I have no particular talents other than I'm too stupid to quit.
That's a good talent. So yeah, I'm curious, like at that time, if you could, I'm sure you can reel back in your mind what it felt like to be, the tail between your legs, you're driving across the bridge and you've got nothing but a borrowed vehicle and you've just left behind a fairly affluent lifestyle. What did you feel like? Did you feel optimistic? Did you feel taken down? Or did you feel like this is just, something I'm going to take in stride and I'm going to bounce back?
It depended on the hour of the day.
Good answer.
There were days when I was beaten down. I remember talking to my mother back in Atlanta one day. She said, "What are you going to do now?" And I said, "I'm going to start a new industry." And she said, "Have you thought about just getting a job?" And I said, "Who do you think you're talking to? You didn't raise me to be an employee." The gays always owned their own businesses. So I'm going to own my own business or die trying. And then there were times it might have been, what do you call it, where you go up and down mentally, the terminology. It might have been a little bit of that, but I was giddy at times. I remember walking into the office building that I had rented. How do you rent an office building with a nickel? You come up here and do sales training years ago when you were rolling. So when you come back to town with a nickel in your pocket, they don't know that.
Right, exactly. Well,
so it's Ben Gay. Give him the office. Don't worry about anything.
Yeah. Well, and the other lesson there is like the human capital, the fact that it's the relationship capital, right? Like I don't feel that I'll ever, go homeless or starve because, I believe I've developed enough good relationships with people who trust me and believe in me and that I've helped at times and will turn around and help me back. Right?
Absolutely.
So there's that sense of possibility, and inside of it, if you are feeling like, wow, I'm really low right now, in a place where most other people would feel like dying or like this is terrible, that feeling of being giddy is like what that is. It's almost like I'm stepping back, looking at this, and it's like this is hilarious. I mean, I can't believe here I am.
How did I, Dr. Steve Taubman, get in this situation?
Yeah, and there's something that's very freeing about being able to like almost laugh at yourself and even laugh at your own tragedies.
Absolutely.
Of course, right? Because in the long run, it's going to be okay.
Let me tell you a quick story about Augmendino and how he saved you're talking about highs and lows, how he saved my life without knowing it. Okay. I was talking to him, he used to do seminars with us. I was talking to him one day about highs and lows, and I don't think I'd read all of his material, but he told me of his 2 suicide attempts when he was a hopeless drunk living on park benches and so on. You may have heard the story. He went to buy a gun to kill himself, but it was $39, which was $39 more than he had. So that saved him. And then one I've never read anywhere, he just told me he did get a gun a year or so later, still in trouble. And he said, "Ben, I put it in my mouth and I tasted defeat." And I sort of figured out he was probably talking about the steel, the residue from having been fired, the cleaning, whatever. I sort of, as he told me the story, I knew what he was talking about. Fast forward a year, things are coming apart. William Penpatrick and I are beating ourselves to death over the head with each other's wallets. He owed me $14 million and so on. He wound up dead in a plane crash in our P-51 up at the ranch, and I wound up broke, leaving town with a nickel in my pocket. Shortly before that, I got out the 357 Magnum I had for no particular reason. I thought, I'm Ben Gay and I live in the big house. Someday I may have to defend it from the poor people, from the marauders who are going to come for me, not knowing I was about to be one of them. And I got out my 357 Magnum, said a prayer, cocked it, and put it in my mouth. And I lined myself up so it wouldn't splatter on the walls. It would go through the door and out onto the deck and wouldn't mess up my office. Well thought out. But as I put it in my mouth, I tasted defeat. And everything Og said to me flashed back. He said, I tasted defeat, and I'm not a type of guy you defeat. And I put down the gun. I tasted defeat, put down the gun, and started the 800 call center industry.
That's an intense story, man. That's a very intense story. That really hit me right here.
You ask about highs and lows. There's one of the lows.
Yeah, that's a low. And of course, all of our lows become part of the story. You know, it's
sure
what we are.
And so, help other people.
You know, first of all, let me say that this has been really fun talking to you. I'm sure we could go on for another hour, and that would be fun. But out of respect for the people that I've indicated that we do these like 20 to 30 minute programs for, I'm going to let us wrap it up here in a moment. But I want to ask you if you could sort of share how people could learn more about you and your materials and whatnot, because
sure.
I'm sure a lot of people will want to know.
I'm on Facebook and LinkedIn and all those things. So Ben Gay the Third, be sure and check there. Go to my website if you'd like. I couldn't find my high-tech thing, but there it is. Go to my website, www.bfg3.com.
Okay, yep.
Stay a little time. We won't bug you, but occasionally I'll send you something I think might be of interest to you. If you're interested in the famous Closers series, the best-selling, most powerful, most popular books on selling ever written, this is the Closers Part 2.
Okay.
The more famous one is Part 1, but Part 2 is a better book, actually.
Okay.
You go to stores.ebay.com/Ronzoni, spelled Ronzone, not like spaghetti, books. And they are currently, and I think will continue to do it, featuring all of my materials with special pricing and free shipping.
Okay.
And that's less than you get. So don't order at my website.
Yeah.
And you might say, Steve, how can they do it for less than you do it? Well, Ronzoni is my wife's maiden name. That's where that comes from.
Okay.
And the way she does it is she sneaks in our warehouse and steals books. So she doesn't have a product cost. So that's as long as until we figure out a way.
We're not going to be arrested as like
accomplices. Yeah. Until we figure out a way to keep her out of the warehouse, that's the best place to get books.
And you definitely don't want to shake the tree because that's your wife. So
exactly.
Okay, it's a win-win. Ron, this is Ron. I'm calling you Ron. That's funny.
That's all right. I don't mind.
Yeah. Super fun. I want to definitely keep the door and the channels open to continue conversations with you. This has been really fun. Really enjoyed finally getting to meet you and hear your stories and just get your energy. And it's a great pleasure. Any final words of wisdom for anybody before we sign off here?
Real quickly, I didn't have anything planned, but Dr. Hill, when he was my mentor for the last 2.5 years of his life, among other things, several different times he showed me how to start with a clean slate. He was saying, you're going to have to move up in the company. I wasn't bright enough to know I was president already. There wasn't far to go because the owner was the chairman of the board. Yeah. But he said, to move up in the company, I was talking about, sometimes I don't know exactly what I should be doing. He said, you're going to move up. Let's leave a roadmap for the guy who's going to take your place. So what should he do every day? It took the better part of a day, but we wrote and wrote and wrote and crossed things out and added things and so on. When we got done, we had a list of about 20 things that my replacement should do if he was going to be a rip-roaring success.
Okay.
And we agreed on it. Done. And I said, thank you very much. I was thinking, I don't know what I'm going to do with this. He said, now write your name at the top of the page, and that's what you do starting tomorrow morning. In other words, we didn't try and fix this and fix that and fix this. We started with a clean slate. I would suggest to those of you listening and watching who maybe are going through a tough time with this, and I don't discount that at all. Trust me, I understand. I've been there, done that. But start out with a clean slate and say, if I'd known this was going to come 10 years ago, what would I have done? Okay, write it down. Then do that starting tomorrow morning.
Beautiful. That's so inspiring and so practical. Thank you. Thanks for your time. I'm gonna stop the recording here, and that's where we'll end it for everybody else. But stick around for just a moment, if you would.
Thank you, Steve.